Hello, welcome to another edition of Labor's Worldview TV. I'm your host, David Johnson. Well, today I have a special guest, Carol Ammons, who's running for state representative from the 103rd District, which encompasses most of Champaign-Urbana. Carol, welcome to Labor's Worldview. So tell me, Ms. Ammons, what made you decide to run for state rep?
Well, I've been working in this community since 2003. I was a founder of a local organization, co-founder anyway, of Champaign-Urbana Citizens for Peace and Justice. Some of the work that we set out to do was to design public policy that addressed some of the needs of the community around environmental justice, around criminal justice areas, and around educational justice. And so out of that work, I've been able to serve on public bodies like Champaign County Board and currently the Urbana City Council, which has tied my civic work to my public service work, allowing me to cross those two together. When I found out that the seat for the state's representative was going to be open, I knew that this was an opportunity for me to bring the kind of leadership that I've been able to demonstrate here locally to the state level and affect public policy that affects everyone in the state. So I thought it was a very good and natural fit. Okay.
So what would you like to accomplish when you win the election in March and then later in November?
Well, I think right now we have a great opportunity before us for the citizens of Illinois to really reshape what the next 20 to 50 years for our state will look like. We have to address our tax issues in the state. We have to generate more revenue. We have to bring more people on board to address jobs and education in the state. And I think this is the opportunity to do it. And I'm excited about being on the cuff of changing policy that will affect generations of children as they become adults in our state. So passing a progressive income tax would be one of those. Getting people on board, organizing forums, talking about improving health care. Those are the things that I'm interested in doing at the State House.
Okay. Well, I happened to go to the debate the other night at the county board chambers, and what was interesting was, or I should say that I thought the two, at least with the questions asked, the two biggest differences I saw between you and your opponent was on the issues of corporate taxes and also the amount of the minimum wage should be raised. Could you kind of illustrate a little bit about what your differences are as far as, first of all, corporate taxes?
Well, certainly, as we look at what happened with our pensions and the pension earners, a good 60+% of those being here in East Central Illinois, I was really concerned about the idea of cutting the pension and then giving that benefit, in essence, to corporations, which is what would actually happen if that is passed through the state legislature. I find it appalling in some way to suggest to the pension earners and the retirees that we don't have money for you, but we do have money to save the corporations and allow them to benefit from that which we're actually taking out of the pension. I think our citizens in Champaign-Urbana, as well as throughout the state, really should be saying, no, we don't want to see, again, the middle and lower income people hurt. A lot of those people, they don't earn Social Security, and they are living literally check to check, and I understand what it's like to live check to check, because I've been there. And so I think that message is the wrong message for the people of Illinois. And I have not seen, actually, with the level of tax cuts we've already provided to our industries, that has created more jobs. We've actually lost a lot of jobs, even though there are a lot of benefits being handed out at this point.
Okay. Yeah, you had a series of handouts at that debate, and what was interesting is your opponent said he was in favor, I believe it was the bill that's been supported by current Governor Quinn, to where he was going to be a across-the-board tax cut for all corporations in the state of Illinois, where you had a counter-proposal that basically stated that if a corporation were to get a tax break, then they need to provide certain things in exchange for it. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think those, the tax cuts really need to be not just tied to job creation, but job retention. We have to keep jobs in Illinois, and we also have to provide an environment for which jobs can thrive. Small businesses create and generate a lot of employment in local communities. And so providing some incentives to grow small business also helps the economy and helps people who are unemployed. And so I think there needs to be a balance. There needs to be a balance between the creation of jobs, the retention of jobs, and the tax cuts that are the benefits of those jobs. All of those together, I think, will make a healthier community for Illinoisans.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, some of the specifics of that were that in order for a company to get a tax break, that they would have to provide a full-time job that would pay, I believe it was at a minimum 10% above the median income in Champaign County, and also that they would have to add at least 3 new full-time employees or 10% increase in their workforce to continue this tax break.
And I think that needs to be looked at every single year. So as we hand out new incentives across the board to corporations and any tax benefits that they receive, you really have to look at what they've created. And I think that that's the kind of leadership going forward that we really need to have. If we don't do something that is substantial in the state of Illinois, then we'll continue to see regressive type of policies come out of Springfield, and I'd like to change that.
Okay. All right. Very good. Yes, and then on the subject of raising the minimum wage, if I remember correctly, your opponent, I think it was suggesting like $10 an hour would be just fine would it be appropriate for a minimum wage, but you thought that more of the $15 an hour level would be more appropriate. What's been basically demanded around the country?
Well, the president this week just did a press conference talking about how even though they're trying to raise that federal minimum wage, it is still insufficient to keep pace with the cost of living in this country. And in specific, in our state, we have not been able to keep pace. And so $15 won't be enough. We know that people are just barely getting by currently. And right here in Illinois, at the University of Illinois, an economist did a review of the minimum wage issue. And he said $17 would still not make us really address the issue of poverty in our community, because the cost of living has substantially surpassed that. And so my recommendation of 15 it's not completely out of the universal scope, and it's certainly not a crazy idea. But the question is, as he asserted during the debate, is that if we raise it to $15, you would just close businesses. I think if you look at corporations, you'll see that their top CEOs, after they pay their bills, still have a substantial amount of money in their own personal pockets that really could help the workers of those companies. I don't know if we would sink the boat if we actually raise it to an adequate living wage.
Okay. Another interesting topic that was raised the other night was the war on drugs and decriminalization. What are your views on that?
I think there are a couple things that really need to take place. We are making small steps in Illinois with medicalization of marijuana. That's only the first step, though. We know that we really need to go further. We need to decriminalize marijuana, its usage. Many states have already set the standard for us that we can look at, see how they are doing with it. It also generates revenue for those states in the millions of dollars. And so where we are suffering financially, there is a possibility of fixing that. But at the same time, we need to look across the board at decriminalization and really repairing the communities that have been hurt by the criminalization of marijuana usage, and the number of people who've served time and are currently serving time in prisons throughout the state for possession. A good 51% of those people are sitting in as nonviolent offenders for possession. And the facts are there. And I think that we have an opportunity to, again, give leadership on this issue and then look at the other schedules, right? The president is looking to sign an executive order, and I hope he does that, to reclassify marijuana, which will change the outcomes in the criminal justice system. And I think we can't afford to continue to do what we're doing.
51% of all current prisoners in Illinois are there for nonviolent drug charges?
Most of those in prison are there for drug charges.
Okay. So that would, not only if marijuana was, say, legalized like in Colorado and Washington, that not only would it provide revenue for the state from taxes on it, but also that there would be tremendous savings from less prisoners in jails, because it costs, I believe, what, $40,000 a year roughly to house a
Some say
prisoner?
between $26,000 and $40,000, depending on where they're housed. That's a good amount of money.
Indeed.
We know that it costs us about $30,000 a year to send a student to the University of Illinois. So if you really look at what we spend on keeping someone inside of an institution instead of putting them into community-based services, which I'm an advocate for, we could actually redirect some funds to education and allow for the doubling of our MAP grants and be able to actually cover the costs. But we have to reprioritize, right, in our state and move away from an institutional kind of methodology that just simply lock them up and throw away the key at our expense, by the way, for those who could benefit from services in the community.
Okay. And this is not such a crazy idea. I mean, most of Western Europe, I'm aware of, is decriminalized as far as drugs. And in fact, drug use has dropped since they've made it no longer a law enforcement issue, but instead a public health issue.
I think the research is absolutely there, where we can look and see what other countries have done, and now other states are doing.
And now other states, yes.
In the United States to address this issue. Many of these issues are mental health issues that go unaddressed. And if we were able to provide the adequate resources for our mental health institutions right here in Champaign-Urbana in the 103rd District, we may be able to really make a dent in this issue as far as criminalization of drugs and drug possession. I think we can change it, but you have to have legislators who have the willpower to do it. And I think that's where the new leadership comes onto the horizon. People like myself who've been, my mother unfortunately was addicted to alcohol for many of my younger years, and she had to fight her way out of that. I understand how hard it is to come up from the bottom. Okay. I understand that. And I didn't grow up in the ivory tower. So I have worked with people personally who have changed their lives. And if with a little bit of help and redirecting the funds, we can actually make the community a better place.
So the redirecting of funds could actually help people with substance abuse problems, alcohol abuse problems.
Well, I can tell you from my own work experience in this community, when we cut funding, meaning the state cut funding to Prairie Center, which is in our community, that really hurt our community. And Prairie Center, who provides a needed service for people who are struggling with addiction, they couldn't provide those services anymore. They lost residential, they lost staff. That doesn't make it better. That actually feeds the criminal justice system. So for us, we get a chance to create a budget that makes sense for communities. That is the opportunity a state representative gets, and I would like to take advantage of that opportunity.
Okay. Well, you know, it's interesting, this current campaign, in all my years, I'm a lifelong resident of Champaign-Urbana and been interested in politics since I was about 6 years old, believe it or not. And this has to be one of the most, I mean, some of the things that have been, allegations have been thrown around, some of the dirtiest tricks and misrepresentation I've seen in any campaign in my lifetime here in a local race. And why do you think that is? Why do you think it is that the Democratic Party establishment are so, motivated to try to prevent you from getting elected? Is because they think that you'll represent your constituents as opposed to other vested interests in the state?
Well, I think there is certainly evidence that I represent my constituents. I've represented them on the county board, and I've represented them in the city of Urbana. And I'll continue to do that in the state. I also have worked on many campaigns in this community that I've not actually experienced anything that I'm personally experiencing at this point. I do want to say to people who are out there, everything that is presented is not necessarily as it seems. You know, I grew up in a working single mother household who was maintaining 2 jobs to try to just get by, still utilizing public assistance to make ends meet. As a young woman, having to have a daughter at 19 years old and then get married early at 21 and say, how am I going to finish school? I go on a business trip because I'm interested in entrepreneurship, and I've always been interested in it. And from that sponsorship, I find this institution that says, hey, you can You can earn your degree at home. You can do this correspondence course. I thought it was a great idea. Taking advantage of any educational opportunities is what I decided to do.
And what year was this, by the way?
This was back in 1997. I
Okay.
went in around 96, 97.
Okay.
And as a result of that, I've been able to not only run my own business for 8 years, I've maintained and managed nonprofit organizations successfully. I've consulted on nonprofit strategy. I've done a lot of work in this community that surely should stand for my level of intellectual ability.
Okay.
So that shouldn't be the question, and certainly is not the requirement of the state to be a state representative. But for those who may question my ability, I've not missed meetings unless I was ill or my children were ill. I've been at all of my meetings for the county board. I've made sure that I come to my meetings at the city council. I am engaged. I do my homework. I ask the questions that some people won't ask. And that's true, which is why some people are not supporting me today. But I understand that because there is no politician that will say everybody's happy with everything I've done. If there is, I'd like to learn from that person, but that's not true.
Yes.
And so I've done everything that I possibly can to be a good steward of public resources, and I've not done any cronyism. You know, I've not done any of those things or given contracts to my family members or any of those things that you read about. Those are not experiences I've had. I've always tried to serve the public interest, and I'll continue to do that.
Okay. Well, speaking of contracts, I understand when you were on the county board that you had a bit of a fight. Some of the county board members were wanting to bring in non-union contractors to do work that for the county or whatever with public funds, and you staunchly fought that. And can you talk just real briefly about that?
Well, some of the battles that I've experienced on the county board were good training grounds to sharpen my skills so that I can advocate, again, across the board for the working class people of this community. I've been doing that for a number of years. And even though I didn't necessarily garner the support of the state AFL-CIO, the local AFL-CIO did support me and did give me financial contribution early in this race because they remember. They remember the service that I've given to them as a former county board member. And I've always done that, whether they were there asking me to do it or not. I thought it was the right thing to do. And so I've tried to maintain a level of service to the community, regardless to whether it's my own personal constituency or not. I find it to be all of my constituency when we're fighting privatization issues. I don't support privatization. And so I would not allow my vote to be cast to privatize services that should be available to the working class people of this community.
Okay.
And I'll continue to do that.
Well, I have some personal experience with this disconnect, if you will, between local AFL-CIO and the state. When I was vice president of the local AFL-CIO, we refused to endorse a local candidate because that local candidate was a mayor of Urbana. And this mayor actually opposed a living wage ordinance, basically, that required if the city, any public monies that were used for a contractor, that they had to pay a living wage. And also the same candidate, or I should say incumbent mayor, had a battle with the firefighters to where they were without a contract for over a year, and he brought in this infamous national anti-union law firm. And we were supposed to support this person after he did all this, and this was like after we'd all consulted him and he told us basically to go fly a kite. We refused to endorse him, but the state AFL-CIO still endorsed him. So this is not the first time this has happened, Ms. Ammons.
Well, I appreciate the story because I don't think I was here in the community at the time, but what I do understand is people who are voters in this district are going to have to make a decision. They're going to have to decide if they want the same type of corporate representation, the big money guy, backed by the big wigs up in Chicago, the Springfield machine. They're going to have to decide that. Is that worth the risk? Are you willing to make that risk? That's a decision that the voter, the average person, is going to have to make a decision on. Are you going to support the candidate for the people who cut your pension? That's the question.
Yes.
The people are going to have to answer that question when they go into that ballot box and they say, which name should I check? I am not that person. I'm not the person who's being backed by the machine. I am an independent Democratic candidate who stood on Democratic values. And if you actually just pull up the Democratic principles on the Democratic website, you just read down that list. Read the list carefully, and you say, which one of these candidates has demonstrated their ability to stand on their own platform? That's the question. Who's done that? And then the decision is quite easy. They'll be able to say, I think we can go with Carol because she's demonstrated the principles of the Democratic Party. Not necessarily the person who, until the announcement of running for the 103rd District, my opponent, I had never ever met. I had been here for 13 years working within the Democratic Party and had never met him. So that should probably give you an idea that this is a person that's been brought out, again, by the machine to prevent a person, an everyday person like myself, from going to Springfield.
Okay. Well, on that issue about the teacher's pension, the current state representative Naomi Jacobson back several years ago sided with Mike Madigan, the head of the Illinois Democratic Party, to cut teachers' pensions, even though a lot of her constituents were teachers and other state workers, by the way, were affected by this too. People that worked for the local schools support staff, people who worked at the University of Illinois. Would you have voted that way back several years ago? And what would you do now that it's already, I mean, what would you do to resolve or work with the problem now?
Well, I can say I would not have voted that way if I were in that position at the time. Currently, I can say the support that I've gotten from the Illinois Federation of Teachers would be my constituency today, and I would vote in their interests. I spoke to a Chicago teacher yesterday who was absolutely supportive of my candidacy and suggested that the regular person with regular issues that I've experienced in my lifetime is exactly what they want in a candidate. So I'm confident that I would represent the interests, again, of my constituency. I'm hoping that the Supreme Court will not uphold the what I consider unconstitutional law that was passed out of Springfield. Hopefully they'll kick it back to the State House and make the legislators work with, again, the unions who've tried to be, I believe, reasonable in putting forward a reasonable solution to the pension problem. And I want to have an opportunity to work with those unions, the Rio One Coalition, who's really fighting hard to protect the interests of the working class people. And hopefully they will put it back in their court, allow us all to come back to the table and to hammer out something that is really equitable and just for the people of our district, but for the people of the entire state of Illinois. The American people today are really in a precarious situation. The wealth gap is not closing, it's simply growing, and it's growing so rapidly that people don't know exactly how they're going to maintain their homes. People have foreclosed and lost their property. I've been there. I've lost a home. I've lost a home in the middle of a school board race while I was trying to serve my community. Once again, our home was lost, and we had to figure out what to do for 3 weeks until I found my current home that I live in. And so I've been in a very difficult situation like many Illinoisans have been in, and I understand where they're coming from. So when you send me to Springfield, you'll be sending a person who can relate and who can look at the full picture and say, how do we actually get to the middle ground? That's where we want to get. Not to the side of the wealthy and the rich, and not necessarily keeping everybody exactly where we were, because we know we have to make changes. But do we hurt those who've earned? I don't think so. I think we need to make a proposal that is going to be future from there on, not retroactively.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask you a question. Several states in the United States have currently Vermont has been one state that has passed a Medicare for all bill for their residents, and there's other states where the bills are sort of in committee. In fact, Illinois has a current bill, Medicare for all health care bill, that's currently has, I think, about a dozen and a half co-sponsors, but still it's kind of bogged down in committee. What would your position be if you were elected state rep on Medicare for all for the citizens of Illinois?
Well, as a recipient, again, of health insurance that's got skyrocketing premiums and co-pays that, can kind of keep you from going to the doctor. I know how it is to have to figure out how to pay these out-of-pocket expenses. Obamacare, as they call it, the Affordable Care Act, as we call it, is one step. Is one step toward getting insurance for those who would otherwise be completely uninsured. But I don't think it's all the way where we really need to go. When we look at the controlling of the industry by the insurance companies, I think that's what's driving the prices up. We got to move that out of the hands of the people who are the benefactors. Anytime you have people who can set the prices and set the rates, it's going to be quite difficult for us to keep pace with it. So I think the single payer system will allow us to set some standards and allow the ceiling to stay low enough that the average family can actually afford to go to the doctor. Some people who have insurance right now in my community that I've talked to, they have dental insurance. But when you look at dental costs, by the time you leave from the dentist's office, per member of your household, like we have 4 people in our home, when I finish paying for just the cleaning visit, that's $60 for each one of us. Just to go and get our checkups, our cleaning. Everybody can't do that, even with insurance. And so I think the system itself needs to be reevaluated. I'm hoping that, again, the single payer system the discussions can be had throughout the state. I think people need to start having forums, something that I enjoy doing as a current public official. We have lots of forums. We have ways where people can talk about these really big topics. And as a state legislator, I will also host forums to talk about these serious issues that really I would like to hear from the public what they want to do on these.
Okay. You mentioned earlier about talking to a Chicago teacher, the last couple of questions, and it seems like from what I know about the issue up there is that the public school system in Chicago, which by the way, they do not have an elected school board, they have an appointed school board by the mayor, who's currently Rahm Emanuel, and from what I understand from the teachers up there and some parents, in fact, is that what's been happening is that the city of Chicago has been using TIF funds money that's supposed to be going to school for other purposes, basically for to benefit various corporate entities like Hyatt hotels. And they're trying to put in place a system of privatized charter schools, which are private schools, but that are funded by public money. And what happens with these charter schools, of course, is that there's no unions allowed as far as the teachers. There's very little or no parent involvement, and there's no accountability. What's your opinion on charter schools?
I think if there's going to be charter schools, then the people who charter them should pay for them. We certainly should not take dollars from our public schools, schools that are suffering currently. The charter school system assumes that the public schools are doing poorly because teachers aren't good or unions are causing the trouble. Some of the things that we've heard over the years as to why they should take the public dollars and put it into charter schools. But research has shown that charter schools perform at or at the same rate as our public schools. Not that much better. The only difference is they're privately held. We understand that there's an attempt to literally close our public schools. That hurts our community. I don't support the closing of our public schools, and I don't support the redirecting of funds from our public institutions, again, to private institutions, and then suggesting that our public institutions are not faring well simply because of the teachers or the unions. I don't believe that that's the case. I think what we see right now is an attempt to expand privatization in the educational sphere. There's an attempt to do it in the prison industry. There's an attempt to do it in every public sector that you see. The privatization model is being pushed at the state, at the local level. And I, again, have always been against privatization. And I believe that charter schools is just another way to do that.
Okay. Well, let's go to the portion here. I guess I'd like to call it like last words. Maybe I should call it last topics. What would something basically just why don't you let the viewers hear sort of some of your opinions, views, or whatever of things that we haven't touched on?
You know, I think I've heard a lot in the last few weeks. A lot of demonization of me. Not necessarily talking about my public policy, though, so that's an important part to consider. There hasn't been much discussion about things that I voted on. The millions of dollars of infrastructure projects that I voted on as a county board member, and the work that we're doing, the great work in the city of Urbana that we're doing to improve infrastructure, those are not the conversations that are being pushed by my opponent. Of course, there is only one thing that has to be said about that. Again, this is an attempt to distract the voters from the real issues. The issue that my opponent just doesn't want to talk about, really where he stands. We've not heard about that. We've heard about Carol is this or Carol is that. And again, that's a distraction. I want people to understand that that's what that's about. The other thing is that this election is so important. This election takes place with a certain backdrop. And that backdrop is the privatization of schools. That backdrop is the breaking of unions. There's a backdrop of lowering the minimum wage. There's a backdrop of more prison and incarceration. So we have to look at what is the backdrop, what's the message here. These are all taking place with either a corporatized candidate or a candidate of the people. And I suggest that people want a candidate of the people, and that's me. I also want to say that if you look at the affairs in Springfield right now, state of affairs in Springfield really should be shaken up. The people of Illinois must take seriously who they're sending. Don't buy the big commercials and the glossy ads. Don't find that to be the decision maker for you. Look at the person's work history. What have they been doing? Before they decided to run, who are they? And what have they been doing? And then make a decision based on your own ability to say, what's important to me, not the shiny, glossy, switch and bait tricks that they do during political campaigns. Who has the most ads on television? We have to be a little more, show a little more depth than that in this election, and I think the people will. The other thing that I want to address is this isn't a time where we can sleep. We cannot sleep in this community. Our funding sources are steadily cut at the University of Illinois. Local students need access to that higher institution. I think people from Parkland College would really appreciate more MAP grants so that they can attend the university. I think people in our community want more jobs that have living wages, not just regular low-wage jobs that require them to also have public assistance. I like them to have living wage jobs that would allow them to be independent. That's what we're looking for. And this is what I think the past has produced that we don't want to go back to. I also want people to understand that I understand people like me. People who are struggling, who have been on hard times, who may have worked for a company for 20 years and got laid off, didn't know what they were going to do. Some who may have lost their homes through foreclosure. I completely understand that. And I want us to pass laws that help them and not hurt them. That's something that I want us to do in this election. And finally, I'll just say we shouldn't risk this position with confused leadership. My opponent is clearly being backed by the speaker. He sent a staff member here to help him in his campaign.
Mike Madigan you're talking about?
Yes.
In Springfield? Mm-hmm.
That's his choice.
Mm-hmm.
But the people of this district have not been faring well with that type of leadership. And those who may be supporting my opponent, I wish them well. I really believe at this time, though, that the electorate is intelligent enough to know that we cannot do business as usual. And what we've seen in this election, as you expressed at the beginning of this show, you've never seen a campaign of this kind in this community. I came to this community from Chicago, where things were just downright dirty. I came here because I wanted to get away from that. Mm-hmm. And so at this time in my life, I'm looking at the same thing that was up in the city where I came from. It's disappointing, but it's the reality of politics, I guess, today. But I'm well weathered, I would say. One of the SEIU members said that to me, that I'm well weathered to stand the assault, and at the end of the day, to tell the people why they should vote for me. They should vote for me because I've given them proven leadership. I've stood in the face of really hard decision making. I've cast votes. I've written policy. I think that's what it's all about. And I hope people will make that decision and be just in that decision.
Okay, so thank you for tuning in to another edition of Labor's Worldview TV. Until next time, be safe and power to the people. Take care.